to Puppets for Polling. I'm Scully. I'm dressed as RBG today. And today we have another special guest. She is a lecturer in the Department of Political Science at Cal State Dominguez Hills and the Department of History at Cal State LA. She is also a research affiliate with the Center for Study of Women at UCLA and the president of the Historical Society of Southern California. She received a law degree and her PhD from UC Berkeley and teaches in the areas of constitutional law and the U.S. Supreme Court, which we will talk about today. Her current research focuses on the careers of the Supreme Court Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and RBG. Please welcome Dr. Donna Schuele. Thank you so much for joining us, Donna.
Thank you, Scully, for having me. I'm very happy to be with everybody today. I love the RBG look. I have my pearls around my frame here. On November 3rd, we're all supposed to wear pearls in memory of RBG.
Absolutely. I'll be wearing my pearls.
All right.
Well, great. Thank you again for joining us. I say we get right into this because inquiring minds want to know. With the newly confirmed appointment of Amy Coney Barrett and November 3rd around the corner, people are concerned about the Supreme Court and that they might decide on the presidential election. So can you tell us how that can happen and maybe how voters can be more aware?
Exactly. This has been on people's minds a lot. It's not just going and voting early or voting on November 3rd, but are we going to see a repeat of what happened in the 2000 election with Bush and Gore? And how is it that the Supreme Court could get involved in an election? I mean, democracy, isn't an election supposed to be decided by the people? The Supreme Court is made up of 9 unelected, lifetime appointed people. How would they happen to decide who gets elected as president of the United States?
That's right.
So I think that's, people are shaking their heads and scratching their heads about that. And if you weren't around in 2000 or you don't remember what happened, I'd like to take you back and run us through that a little bit.
Take us back.
Yeah, let me take you back. And I'll tell you, if you were around during that time and I'm triggering anything here, I totally get it. I sympathize with you. It is sort of PTSD kind of just coming back into us as we think about this. Many of you might remember where you were when you heard about different things happening in the 2000 election. So let me take you back to 20 years ago when Al Gore was running against George Bush. It all came down to one state, Florida. And this time around, the state to look at may not be Florida. As the election has gotten closer, the word is that the state to look at is Pennsylvania. Okay, so we may have a different state. Well, the vote was so close in terms of the number of states that George Bush had won and the number of states that Al Gore had won. And the candidate needed 270 electoral votes to get pushed over the top. So the number of votes, electoral votes that Florida had was going to make the difference. Okay. And some of you might remember in 2000 that on the night of the election, the networks called Florida for Gore. You might remember that.
Yeah, it was a very scary time.
And I happened to be on a flight. I was actually coming back from Florida. I'd been in Florida on vacation. I got to see firsthand the way Californians would not have seen in 2000, all of the advertising that was going on, all of the battleground in that state. I got to see it. It was really interesting. But we weren't, so concerned. And then when the pilot came on, as we were flying across country and said that the networks have awarded Florida to Gore, And mind you, we were flying back to Los Angeles. A cheer erupted on the plane. And I got off the flight feeling really good. It was about 10 o'clock at night, our time. And I was met at the gate. That's back when people could meet you at the gate, pre 9/11. I was met at the gate by my husband, and I had a big smile on my face. And he says, "Did you hear?" And I said, "Yes, the network's called for Al Gore." And he goes, "No, they've taken it back." And I said, "What?" And he said, "It's too close to call." And we walked by some television stations in the airport. We watched a little bit about it. It just was, crazy. So as the days went on and it was remained very close, some people started to ask, do you think this will make it to the Supreme Court? Now, those of us that are knowledgeable about the Supreme Court, by and large, kind of laughed. And, oh no, the court would never take a case like this. It's too political, we said. It's not going to happen. You guys, you don't know about the court. Yeah, let us tell you about it. And we thought that we knew everything. Those folks that were nervous about this were right to be nervous about it. The case was very complicated, and it bounced around in the Florida courts for a while, in the federal courts. It just was kind of crazy. You might remember when you heard that the Florida Supreme Court had ordered the recount to continue, and you might have cheered about that. And then when the Supreme Court said it would take the case, at that point, that's the point where I got really afraid about what was going to happen. Because if the court had agreed, if the court had believed, if enough justices had believed that this was too political, then we would have known that right away. It would not have taken a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so that was the point at which nervousness set in. Now, one of the other things about the Supreme Court getting involved in a case like this, first of all, it's very political. But second of all, the Supreme Court doesn't move quickly, right? It takes sometimes years for a case to make its way to the Supreme Court. And we had an inauguration date in January. Yeah. We had a meeting of the Electoral College in December. Yeah. How could the Supreme Court take a case like this and decide it in time to make a difference?
Right.
So at that point,
Amy Coney Barrett.
Well, that's the political system moving quickly.
Sure.
Right? The Supreme Court, you have to brief cases. You have to argue cases. It takes time. The justices have to think about what they want to do. The one thing that we would say about a court system, and the Supreme Court in particular, is that it's very deliberative. It takes its time. It's supposed to. It's supposed to dot its I's and cross the T's. And we just didn't see how that could happen with this important case. But the Supreme Court rushed everything. Nobody in modern times had ever seen the court move as quickly as they moved with this case. And I don't think, and it hasn't moved this quickly since. Okay. So it was a matter of just a few days in December of the Supreme Court saying they would take the case, of the Supreme Court telling the lawyers, you got to brief the case, and for the Supreme Court to reach a decision. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about why I think the Supreme Court took the case, because I think that that's what's going to be important in the circumstances today. Some things are going to be the same today as opposed to 20 years ago, and some things are going to be different. And I think the part of what convinced the Supreme Court to take the case was not what was going on in courts, but what was going on in the real world. Okay? And if you remember, if you were around at that time and you can remember back, a recount was going on in offices in counties in Florida. Okay. And those who were in favor of George W. Bush stormed those government offices, stormed the offices to physically try to disrupt the recount. In other words, they caused trouble. And it became
trouble back then.
Caused trouble back then.
Yeah.
And it became known as the Brooks Brothers Riot. Now, why would it be called the Brooks Brothers Riot? Because the people who stormed the offices were upper middle class white men. They were the type of guys that would dress in suits. So it kind of got referred to as the Brooks Brothers Riot, of these guys in suits who actually went to disrupt a recount. And what I think worked in this way is that it sent a message. And it sent a message that the nation could descend into a very dangerous, dark kind of protesting time. That this was not going to be an election that would be resolved through the normal channels. Okay. And as a result, I think you had members of the Supreme Court that started to think that they were the line between democracy and maybe anarchy, right? And that they needed to get involved for the sake of the country, right? And that's not a bad reason. That's not a reason we'd say is immoral or unethical or anything like that. But that might not be the role of the Supreme Court. So they took the case and they decided it in lightning speed. And the decision was rather complicated. And I don't want to get into all of the ins and outs of the decision, but we know the result.
Yeah.
The result was that the recount was ordered to stop in Florida. Ballots that might have otherwise been counted were not counted. Ballots that people thought they were legitimately casting weren't counted. And essentially, 5 people in the United States were the votes that counted. 5 people, not even 9, because it was a 5-4 decision, as close as it could get. Now, it ended the story. George W. Bush was elected. But if we take a look at who were the 5 and who were the 4, the fallout from that decision was I think significant. The 5 justices that essentially handed the election to George W. Bush, who was a Republican, had all been appointed by Republican presidents. Okay? The 4 justices who wanted the recount to continue, well, 3 of them had been appointed by, I'm wrong on that. 2 of them had been appointed by a Democratic president. 2 of them had been appointed by Republican presidents. But over on the side of the 5, they handed the presidency to the guy running in the political party that they owed their job to.
So let me just interject here for a minute. This is all really fascinating and scary at the same time, because 20 years later, we're looking at the same situation. And the Republicans have succeeded with the courts in 2000 when the election was close. And it could be like that at this election. So could you tell us what we're looking at here with this time around? And we know that it's the same, but really what's different?
Yeah. So some things are the same and some things are different. Okay. Let me talk about the makeup of the current Supreme Court as something that, as you've identified, Scully, is sort of the same. And then let's look at some things that are different. Okay. So unless you've been living in a cave for the past month, we know Ruth Bader Ginsburg very sadly passed away. Okay. And that gave the opportunity for President Trump to nominate a third person to the Supreme Court. He already got Justice Gorsuch on the court by virtue of the Democrats being unable to fill Scalia's seat, with the Senate Republicans blocking that. Then Justice Kennedy retired and we got Brett Kavanaugh. And now Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies and Trump nominates a third justice. Now, again, lightning speed. Usually it takes a month or more, really more like 2 to 3 months, for a Supreme Court justice to get confirmed, to go through the process.
Right.
We saw it happen in lightning speed.
Yeah.
We also saw hypocrisy, the likes of which we maybe haven't seen in modern government, in decades, of the head of the majority leader of the Senate 4 years earlier saying, "Oh, if we were close to election, we won't consider a nominee." And now, after the election had started, voting had started in some states, we were looking at the consideration of a nominee.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know the end of the story. Amy Coney Barrett was sworn in. She is now a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. So, yeah. Exactly.
Just needed
exactly.
My chest.
So now what do we got for a makeup of a court? 3 justices on the court who owe their jobs to a candidate on the ballot. That wasn't true in 2000. George W. Bush was not an incumbent. There was no incumbent in that election. His daddy had put 2 people on the court, but he hadn't put anybody on the court. So you got 3 people on the court who owe their jobs to one of the candidates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have another 3 people on the court who were nominated by Republican presidents earlier. That's a total of 6.
Yeah.
And we have 3 people on the court who owe their jobs to Democratic presidents earlier. Okay.
So I'm beginning to see a pattern here.
Now, when we think of a court, we think of a court that is supposed to follow the law.
Right.
Right? Not a court that's supposed to say, "Oh, well, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote for the Republican candidate." No. But when we look back to that 5-4 decision with Bush v. Gore, there were a lot of people that said the 5 justices that handed the election to Gore were simply voting their party preference, not what the law was.
Right.
Are we looking again at a possibility of 6 justices? Well, let me back up a little. 3 justices voting their party preference, and 3 justices voting for the boss.
Right. Exactly. And I was just saying this to my friend Socrates the other day, how vile Trump is, and yet we have to vote him out, but there might be a chance that he'll get his way and we'll have to endure his insanity for another 4 years.
And this is where, if we look closely at the rhetoric of what Trump has been saying in the past few weeks, he's been talking a lot about the court deciding this election.
Right.
Right?
Because he's afraid.
Right. And here's the thing with Donald Trump. I don't think he just says things he doesn't mean. He might say a lot of crap, but he
Yes.
means it, right?
Yes.
So when Donald Trump talks about the court determining this election, he is trying to control the narrative,
Yes.
right?
And people are listening to that.
And people are listening to that. People are listening to that. So, yeah, so what do we do if this goes to the courts, or it looks like it's going to go to the courts, or let's back it up a little bit. It looks like it's so close that the election cannot be called within maybe a few days of November 3rd,
Yeah.
right? Ideally, an election called on the night of November 3rd, because the margin is so great, would be a good outcome for the country, but it's not a necessary outcome.
Yeah.
And with so much voting by mail, I don't think it's an expected outcome.
Yeah.
The odds are unlikely that by the time we go to bed on the west coast that the election will have been called.
Yeah.
Unlikely.
This is a very different election.
Very different election. So this is what's different. The other thing that's different is the way the narrative may be controlled.
Sure.
And what that narrative is being controlled to what end.
Right.
Okay. So when we talk about the Brooks Brothers riot, and we talk about these guys that were all about George W. Bush, all about him, and they were high-level backers of Bush, storming those offices. Bush had control over those folks in the sense that he didn't have to go on television and tell them, go out and do that. That's not how that happened. That happened all behind the scenes. They had a direct line to him. What we need to be worried about is if the election is uncertain in the days following, what is Trump going to be doing in communicating to his followers? What's he going to be telling them to do? What's he going to be feeding them to rile them up?
Yeah. The Proud Boys.
The Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by.
Yeah.
Stand by for what? Stand by until I give you orders to get out in the street?
Yeah.
Stand by until I give you orders to start storming county registrar offices? Stand by until I give you orders to cause as much disruption as you can? This is the question today.
You know, I'm going to need another glass of wine listening to all of this. Don't you feel like we should have wine after this?
I think we need a stiff drink. Wine might not be stiff enough, Scully.
You and I need to meet again for a stiff drink on November 3rd, and maybe soon after that.
After that, exactly.
How do we as a nation avoid or handle this?
So this is where we are living in unprecedented times. We have never in the United States had anything but a peaceful transfer of power. And in fact, even in 2000, after the Supreme Court handed the election to George W. Bush, and those of us that were not in favor of the court taking the case and not in favor of that outcome, where we had kind of good reason to protest,
Yeah.
by and large, people went, okay, it's over.
Complacency.
And to his credit, Al Gore said, it's over. He didn't have to. There were actually paths to continue to fight. That
Yeah.
kind of gets lost in the 20 years that has passed.
Sure.
But he believed that for the sake of the country, it was better to concede and to move on.
Yeah.
Now, elections matter.
Sure.
9/11 hits less than a year later. We have a very different next 8 years with George W. Bush in office than with Al Gore in office. I don't think it takes anybody looking into a crystal ball to figure that out.
Yeah.
But right now, can we count on that peaceful transition or peaceful maintenance?
Well,
And
that's
I
a good
think
question.
that is the scary question here.
Yeah.
And again, when we talk about that stand back and stand by,
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be that obvious, right? The dog whistling. We've gotten more familiar with that term, the dog whistling, of sending a message out to your supporters without actually saying it.
Yeah.
We need to have our antenna up for the dog whistling coming from the current administration in that period when the election may be undecided. Because here's the thing. We're not going to see a president dog whistling a month after November 3rd. We're going to see a president trying to control the narrative during that uncertain time so that we get a Supreme Court that says we better step in for the sake of the nation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's where things get scary.
Yes. Very scary.
And so what do you do to counteract that narrative?
Vote.
Right? What do you do?
I think we just vote.
Okay, I think that's great. We vote. And I don't want to discount that, certainly. But so many people have voted already.
Yeah.
Right? So we've cast our ballot. Should we just kind of sit back and figure that we've done what we can do and there's nothing else? I don't think so.
Well, some people have voted and some people are on the fence still. I mean, anyone who might be considering Kanye West is out of their mind, and more out of their mind if they're considering Donald Trump. But
well, yeah, and here's the thing.
Our vote does matter. Our life depends on it. And yet, what else can we do to
vote like your life depends on it? The other thing that I think is different in the 2020 election versus 2016 is that we don't have any third-party candidates that are getting any substantial attention.
Yes.
Who knows how many votes Kanye West will get? But it's not like he's been out there campaigning in a way that serious candidates campaign. We had some serious third-party candidates in 2016. And one of the things that we know is that if Hillary Clinton had been able to capture many of the votes that went to those third-party candidates in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, we'd have a different president today.
Yeah.
Those third-party candidates did make a difference.
Yeah.
Right? We also know that if turnout had been better in 2016 among those who voted for Barack Obama, we'd have a different president today. So turnout seems to not be as big a problem this time around. We're probably going to break records.
We already have.
And in terms of overall votes, we're already starting to break records with nothing more than mail-in ballots.
Yes.
Right? So, to the degree that people are saying, elections, people are not voting anymore, Americans are not fulfilling their civic duty, a lot of people are voting like their life depends on it this time around. Absolutely. That's a good thing.
Yes.
A lot of people have voted already. If you've not voted yet, make a plan to vote. There are plenty of early polling places in California. They are all open as of today. All of the polling places are open as of today.
Yes.
Don't expect to go where you went in 2016.
Right.
Because California has changed its model of voting. We do not have polling places scattered all over neighborhoods.
Right.
So you need to go to that brochure. You need to go online. You need to find out where to go.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter where you go.
Has been very resourceful in letting Los Angelino voters know where to find their voting center, where to find a ballot drop box, and other useful information for their ballot. So Puppets for Polling, definitely use that as a resource for your ballot if you haven't voted. And
here's the thing, if you haven't voted yet and you want to make kind of a party out of it, you want to make an occasion out of it, go to Dodger Stadium and vote.
Yeah.
There's plenty of parking.
Or the Hollywood Bowl.
Go to the Hollywood Bowl. Go to the Staples Center. Go to the LAFC stadium down in Exposition Park. There are a lot of fun places to go to vote this time around.
Yeah.
Go someplace where there's a lot of parking. I don't know that we have a bigger parking lot in all of LA County than Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
Right? So
and they just won. So
make it fun. Put your Dodger blue on and go out and vote. Put your Laker yellow and purple on, go out and vote.
Well, hopefully you're wearing blue for 2 reasons.
For 2 reasons. Dodger blue. And then you voted. Okay, so what do you do now?
Well, that's the question is we vote and you said that's not enough. So how do we be prepared for this election not working out after we voted? How do we defend our democracy?
And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to be prepared to defend our democracy beyond voting. And I don't think that there has been another time in the history of the United States, or at least in modern times, that we've been put to this test.
Yeah.
And so what I think that we need to do is we need to be prepared for an opportunity to show our numbers, to not just show the numbers at the ballot box, to show our numbers in a visual way. In other words, there may be a point where we will have to come out and march in a way that we marched, for example, with the Women's March.
Yeah.
In a way that we marched with the March for Science.
Yeah.
That we made our voices heard by virtue of our sheer numbers.
Exactly. The voice must be heard.
The voice must be heard. The presence must be shown. But here's what I think is important. This isn't me saying stand back and stand by. No. This is different. This is making your voice heard in a peaceful way, like we did in the Women's March, like we did in the March for Science, in a way that captures the mood of what's going on, so that we have a Supreme Court that says we don't need to step in and save this nation from itself.
Yeah.
This nation is doing the people, the government of the people, for the people, by the people, is doing its job of saving itself.
That sounds like the Constitution.
And I think that that is what we need to be prepared to do. Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
Right? So that may mean putting your mask on and going out for people who can take the risk. It may mean that. It may
Like
mean
very
that.
often.
And so
For all the protests that have already been happening for Black Lives Matter, we take those opportunities to use our voice.
exactly. And here's the thing. It can be scary.
Yeah.
I don't think that when people went out for the Women's March that they felt that it was a scary thing.
Yeah.
It was an amazing march, peaceful, completely peaceful, with millions of people participating, not just in this country, but around the world. There's going to be pushback here.
Yeah.
There's going to be pushback because there are groups that have been told with a dog whistle foghorn, stand back and stand by.
Right.
But you know what? Those are the minority of people. It's vitally important that the majority not be silent.
And rise together.
And rise together and really keep this out of the Supreme Court.
We want order in our democracy.
Scully, you're right on.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say to our viewers?
I wish I had unicorns, rainbows, and ice cream cones to talk about today.
It's 2020.
It's 2020, and we need to be prepared. And here's the thing, decades from now, for those who are young enough not to have grandchildren yet, what are you going to tell your grandchildren of what side of history you were on? What are you going to say that you did to preserve our nation? This is a defining moment, and we have an opportunity, each and every one of us have an opportunity to play a role in that defining moment. Vote, and then if you have to, come out in order to control the narrative.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Schuele.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Scully. This has been a lot of fun, and let's hope that after November 3rd, we're raising a glass of champagne, not a stiff drink.
Yes. I hope that we toast to something good for 2021 and the next 4 years. I wanted to thank you again for taking your time to come out here and talk to us, and we'd love to have you back on the show.
I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Everyone, vote. If you haven't voted already, vote, and vote early. And if you want to vote, vote November 3rd.
Vote November 3rd, and do not let anybody take that away from you. If you need to cast a provisional ballot on November 3rd at a polling place, demand a provisional ballot.
Don't be scared away by voter suppression or anyone saying that you cannot vote. You have rights, and your voice matters. Dr. Schuele, we so appreciate having you on the show, and you have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you, Scully. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.